Hello, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I just want to share with you what happened on Monday. On Monday, we were travelling back from visiting friends in Nottingham and deliberately stopped to see Wallerton Hall, the house that was Wayne Manor in The Dark Knight Rises, and is actually the original house, of which a copy was made down in Buckinghamshire, which was Wayne Manor in Batman Begins. So for the third film, they went to the older, original house, literally one-for-one copy.
What will you do?
Rebuild it. Just the way it was, brick for brick.
Hey, I see what they did there. And it was fantastic. We started the day there, looked around the house, I got a real sense of the architecture, and all of that was just whetting the appetite, a preparation, an aperitif, because that evening we were going to go to Manchester to stay with my brother-in-law and visit the Batman Unmasked Exhibition. And that was fantastic. The atmosphere was heavy and rich. There was music, there was theatre smoke. The whole thing was a pop-up venue in a warehouse, which actually itself, the architecture was perfect. It was rusty and riveted and bare bricks. You'll see I took a couple of photos of the setting as much as the focus on artifacts and props and costumes from most of the Batman movies. In fact, I think all of them are represented in one way or another, and it was fantastic. Let's take a look. I'll comment as we go. Okay, Batman Unmasked. The whole thing took place in a warehouse somewhere near the train station in Manchester, and you can see the atmosphere was excellent. They really built up a sense that you were entering a space in Gotham. This is my brother-in-law in the photos, Simon. You'll probably see him a few times. And even in the queue, we were being reminded of the first appearance of Batman in comic book form. The first room we went into was Wayne Manor, where there was a presentation on 85 years of Batman, and a sort of riddle unfolded where a statue had to be turned towards another part of the room to open up the bookcase and reveal the Batcave. It might have been nice to have a grandfather clock entrance, as they did have the red telephone in Wayne Manor, but the bookcase is also in the Nolan movies and elsewhere, so that's fine. But this was where we really started to see props from the movies, batarangs and grapnel guns and all sorts of paraphernalia that actually, interestingly, up close, the more modern stuff is much more believable. And I think that's probably because films are much more high definition. Obviously, Nolan famously, infamously likes to film in IMAX, and so the props seemingly reflect that. Some of the older props, for example, when we see Mr. Freeze's gun from Batman and Robin, literally look awful. And again, I think that's probably an artifact of what the camera does and doesn't see, and how things do and don't come up in different forms of film as well. That was quite interesting. And actually, Mrs. Soup spotted that the bat bombs from Batman Begins, that Christian Bale's Batman uses to blast a wall in Arkham Asylum to get out into an alleyway, looked really, the only word we could think of was crunchy in person. They don't look as high tech, there they are on the screen there, as they do on screen. And that was really cool to see that. Also, as much as Batman and Robin is a terrible movie, the Batman Forever, Batman and Robin aesthetic was very, apart from Mr. Freeze's gun, was very pleasing. Oh, there's the bank card, obviously, from Batman and Robin. The rose gold colour of Christian Bale's Batman's utility belt surprised Mrs. Soup and my brother-in-law Simon in person. that was an interesting observation that they made. Here, of course, we have the cowls in sequence. We've seen Keaton, we've seen Kilmer, we've seen Clooney, Christian Bale, Ben Affleck, and of course Robert Pattinson was represented. But then at the very end was a case that we thought was empty, but actually contained probably our favourite little detail in the whole exhibition. The case was not empty. It actually contained a very special Batman cowl, and that is the cowl that appears in Lego Batman. Yeah, it was great. Keaton's costume had been reworked for The Flash as well, and actually my brother-in-law remarked that it looked somewhat less real than Bale's costume in particular there. Here we have all the utility belts on display, and obviously Robert Pattinson's Batman has a belt that really looks like he could put it together from an army surplus store. All the way through, the architecture of the warehouse was fascinating me, and it really set these artifacts and props and information in a context that just felt right. The lighting was superb, and as a pop-up experience, it was quite immersive. Some of it, though, was a little disappointing. So this, for example, was a room illustrating the Joker, which had a narrative that you couldn't quite hear because of the ambient music in the whole warehouse was slightly drowning it out. But I think it was a road to insanity that revealed itself through lighting and effects. And it did create an atmosphere. But we had to remember that this whole thing had to be family friendly. And so as we went into a hall of mirrors with ivy dangling from the ceiling, and then from there on into a section that was reminiscent of Jim Carrey's Riddler, we had to give it our imagination as much as anything else. This was a sort of collaborative experience. And beyond these themed spaces was quite literally the Rogues Gallery, based on the gallery scene in 1989 Batman, where Jack Nicholson's Joker is trashing all the paintings. He wants to be an artist. This is where they set the costumes, paraphernalia, and artifacts associated with notable villains throughout the history of the movies. There's Jack Nicholson's boombox, for example. Jim Carrey has surprisingly large feet, it seems, and look at that buckle. Bane's mask was a highlight, and again, even the Batman and Robin costumes had little details on them that showed that people cared about this stuff. Arnie's Mr. Freeze armor was immense, slightly worse for wear, wasn't as shiny as it once was, but all of these little details were coming out of the movies. That's Mr. Freeze's gun, which, as I say, in person didn't make a very good impression, but again, presumably on camera back in the day, it worked. We have props from the more recent movies, Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, Harley Quinn played by Margot Robbie, and of course the Batman with the riddles on display. They were really cool to look at, actually. Having studied them when the trailer came out, it was really cool to see them in person. Oh, Anne Hathaway's Catwoman safe-cracking gear. And of course, Heath Ledger's nurse costume. And we never noticed his socks in the movie, but they're really quite funky, actually. This is where the true value of the exhibition was revealed. These are things from Warner Brothers' archive, and some of these things may even be used again in upcoming movies. Obviously, Matt Reeves is still working on another 2 Batman movies with Robert Pattinson's Batman. So it was really a genuine pleasure and a thrill to see the combination of detail, but also what you can get away with in filmmaking. And as I say, what reads on camera. For example, here, Selena Kyle's whip in the Batman in person doesn't look great, but on camera it works. And a lot of these props were quite practical looking, like Heath Ledger's detonator there that he famously is smacking about as the hospital blows up behind him in The Dark Knight. Some of those were the most pleasing, actually, like documents as well, that felt as though they really came from a real world. It's always what I'm fascinated by with props, and why I sometimes make props, is the experience of holding them, to scale, maybe with a bit of functionality. And speaking of which, the Tumbler, a functional driving vehicle. This was one of the highlights of the show, without a doubt, and lots of people were posing by it in the context of a timeline of Batmobiles. It might have been nice to have more than one car in the building, but it was a treat to see the Tumbler. We then went on to an exhibition space that was more about activities and sort of cooling down from the whole trek through the warehouse. Unfortunately, some of the stuff wasn't working. The Scaletrix sets weren't working. Some of the games consoles weren't quite functional. This exhibition has clearly been through the ringer already, and it's going on to London, I believe, next. So presumably they're going to have to do a lot of work to get it back up and running. But as I say, the setting, the atmosphere, the passion for Batman's 85th year was clear, and I very much enjoyed it. And on the way out, the most reasonably priced and exhibition-specific branded item I could find was the gift bag at the counter for £2. It's in the thumbnail for this video, and I'm going to have it framed. Thanks for watching, guys. Until next time, do take care.